President Trump. In the season 11 episode Bart to the Future, the writers of The Simpsons imagined a future in which Lisa Simpson becomes the 45th President of the United States. Early in her administration, she remarks, "We've inherited quite a budget crunch from President Trump." At the time, Donald Trump was best known as a real estate developer and reality TV star, hardly a serious contender for the Oval Office. That throwaway gag was intended purely as satire, riffing on Trump's larger-than-life public persona. 15 years later, in June 2015, Trump announced his candidacy for president, and on November 8, 2016, he clinched the Republican nomination and went on to win the general election. In that moment, a casual line from a cartoon comedy became a startling flash of foresight. The Simpsons had named the very man who would occupy the White House. Though the show never speculated on Trump's policies or the contours of his administration, the mere invocation of his name as president stood out as eerily prophetic. The September 11th foreshadowing. In the Season 9 premiere, The City of New York vs. Homer Simpson, the World Trade Center towers occupy a central role in the plot. When the Simpsons bundle up to retrieve Homer's car from New York, Bart skeptically asks Lisa, "Do New Yorkers really drive under those towers?" To answer him, Lisa unfurls a map of Manhattan marked by two prominent skyscraper icons at Lower Manhattan, clearly representing the Twin Towers. Later in the episode, as Homer crisscrosses the city in search of parking, his frustrations build around the impossibly complicated maze of streets surrounding the World Trade Center. He even enlists a map vendor to point out his car's location. It's down there between the two big towers. The towers are joked about as obstacles, but they're depicted so prominently, literally framing the city on the map, that their presence transcends mere background scenery. Fast forward 4 years. On September 11th, 2001, the very towers that had served as a comedic landmark in a suburban cartoon became the targets of the deadliest terrorist attack in U.S. history. Although the writers of The Simpsons never intended to predict tragedy, the sheer visibility they gave the Twin Towers, down to their exact geographic placement on a stylized New York map, has been viewed in hindsight as an eerie precursor. The Super Bowl upset. In Season 3, Episode 14 of The Simpsons, titled Lisa the Greek, the show first aired on January 23, 1992, just days before Super Bowl 26 took place on January 26, 1992. In the episode, Homer discovers that Lisa has an uncanny talent for picking winning football teams. He turns every Sunday during the NFL season into Daddy-Daughter Day, relying on her selections to place bets at Moe's Tavern. As the Super Bowl approaches, Homer lavishes Lisa with gifts bought from his gambling winnings, only for Lisa to realize she's been valued solely for her prognostication skills rather than for herself. Determined to teach her father a lesson, Lisa makes a cryptic Super Bowl prediction. "If I still love you at the end of the game, Washington will win. If I don't, Buffalo will." Her conditional bet hinges not on sports analysis but on her feelings, yet the outcome turns out to be both personally and prophetically spot on. 3 days later, on January 26, 1992, Super Bowl 26 was played at the Hubert H. Humphrey Metrodome in Minneapolis, Minnesota. The NFC champion Washington Redskins defeated the AFC champion Buffalo Bills by a score of 37-24. That precise result mirrored Lisa's prediction, making Lisa the Greek one of the earliest and most memorable examples of The Simpsons predicting real-world events. Moreover, when the episode was rebroadcast ahead of Super Bowls 27, 28, and 29, the writers redubbed Lisa's line to name that year's actual Super Bowl favorites, and each time, the team she picked went on to win. Though these were playful updates rather than fresh forecasts, they cemented the episode's reputation for uncanny accuracy. The Apple Vision Pro. In the Season 28 episode Friends and Family, Mr. Burns is introduced to a sleek virtual reality headset that looks strikingly like what Apple would later call the Vision Pro. In the show, his chief technologist, Professor Frink, demonstrates a pair of goggles that overlay computer-generated environments onto the real world, then programs an entire virtual family experience. Burns slips on the headset at home, steps into an alternate Springfield populated by digital avatars, and quickly becomes addicted to the illusion of domestic bliss. The goggles' minimalist head strap, floating screens, and gesture-based controls all mirror the design language Apple revealed in early teasers for its Vision Pro. Fast forward to February 2nd, 2024, when Apple officially unveiled the Vision Pro, a mixed reality headset combining ultra-high-resolution screens, spatial audio, and hand-tracking controls to blend digital content with the wearer's surroundings. Tech commentators immediately noted the resemblance to Springfield's VR goggles, right down to the way users summon floating windows with a pinch gesture and rotate through apps mid-air. Although The Simpsons never named Apple in the gag, the parallels are unmistakable. The Tiger Trauma. In this episode, Springfield legalizes gambling and Mr. Burns opens a casino headlined by Gunter and Ernst, a clear send-up of Siegfried and Roy. During their grand illusion act, the pair are menaced and ultimately attacked by their own white tiger, Anastasia, who breaks free of her enclosure and chases them off stage in full view of the casino audience. A decade later, life imitated art in a chillingly similar fashion. On October 3rd, 2003, during a performance at the Mirage in Las Vegas, Roy Horn was mauled by Manticore, a 7-year-old, 400-pound white tiger. The animal leapt onto the stage, bit Horn's neck, and dragged him off before trainers finally subdued it with fire extinguishers. Horn suffered a stroke, a severed spine, and permanent partial paralysis of his left side, injuries so severe they ended the duo's career. The grease theft surge. In the season 10 premiere Lard of the Dance, Homer discovers that the leftover fat from frying bacon can be turned into cold, hard cash. He ropes Bart into a makeshift grease reselling operation, first harvesting drippings at home, then brazenly siphoning oil from Krusty Burger's fryers via a hidden hose in the family car. Their scheme unravels spectacularly when groundskeeper Willie and representatives of the local rendering company ambush them, triggering a runaway grease flood through the school's ventilation and a slapstick grease fight at the dance. Ultimately, Homer abandons the venture after realizing the risks of competing with a corporate grease monopoly and the physical dangers of handling hot oil. Just over a decade later, what began as cartoonish farce became reality. As oil prices climbed in the 2000s, used cooking grease emerged as a valuable feedstock for biodiesel, spawning a nationwide spike in grease burglaries. A 2012 New York Times exposé detailed how unlicensed haulers quietly siphoned thousands of gallons from restaurant fryers, sometimes under cover of night, costing the rendering industry millions each year. Business Insider even drew a direct line from these real-world grease theft rings back to Homer and Bart's animated caper. FaceTime. In this Emmy-winning, future-themed episode, Lisa peeks ahead to the year 2010 after visiting a carnival fortune teller. In one of the first on-screen depictions of consumer video calling, young Lisa holds up her phone and says, "Mom, it's a picture phone," as Marge's live image appears on the handset's display. At the time, video telephony was largely confined to clunky corporate systems or sci-fi speculation. The Simpsons writers pitched it as an everyday convenience. Marge simply taps a button and there's her daughter, crystal clear and just a fingertip away. There's no lab setup, no giant cameras, just a sleek handheld device, presaging the interface design Apple would later refine. 15 years later, on June 7, 2010, Apple unveiled that very reality at its Worldwide Developers Conference. In announcing the new iPhone 4, Steve Jobs introduced FaceTime, which makes the dream of video calling a reality, complete with front and rear-facing cameras, seamless Wi-Fi-based connection, and a one-tap interface. What began as a throwaway gag about a picture phone became a mainstream product selling millions of units within months. COVID-19 prediction. In late 2008, The Simpsons aired Treehouse of Horror Night 9, a Halloween special composed of 3 horror parody segments, but none of them reference pandemics or novel coronaviruses. Despite a wave of social media memes in 2020 claiming the episode foresaw COVID-19, the original broadcast contains no mention of any flu-like outbreak, let alone one originating in Wuhan or caused by a coronavirus strain. The 3 self-contained vignettes, Untitled Robot Parody, How to Get Ahead in Dead Verticing, and It's the Grand Pumpkin Millhouse, stay firmly within satirical takes on killer machines, exploitative advertising, and supernatural Halloween lore. At no point do characters fall ill, don surgical masks, or discuss disease containment. In fact, the episode's opening gag centers on a rigged voting machine in the 2008 U.S. election, with Homer battling a vote-stealing booth. Hardly the stuff of viral outbreak prophecy. So where did the COVID-19 prediction rumor come from? In spring 2020, doctored screenshots began circulating that superimposed coronavirus headlines over a 1993 Simpsons scene about the entirely fictional Osaka flu from season 4's Margin Chains. That claim was thoroughly debunked by fact-checkers, who confirmed The Simpsons never named or described an outbreak resembling COVID-19. In reality, the show's only direct nod to pandemic precautions came years later, when producing the 2020 special Treehouse of Horror 31. The animators retrofitted face masks onto nearly every character, except Homer, for new promotional art and re-airings, an after-the-fact tribute to real-world safety measures, not a prescient prediction. The FIFA corruption scandal. In this episode, Homer Simpson, fresh off a viral hero speech by Lisa, finds himself officiating at the World Cup in Brazil. Early in the match, he's bombarded by bribe offers so blatant they border on farce. At one point, the executive vice president of the fictional World Football Federation turns to Homer and deadpans, "I myself am about to be arrested for corruption." That line lands as a comic aside about crooked sports bureaucrats. Just 1 year later, in late May 2015, the real-world FIFA scandal exploded. The U.S. Department of Justice and Swiss authorities unsealed indictments charging 14 high-ranking FIFA officials with racketeering, wire fraud, and money laundering. And by the end of 2015, nearly 40 individuals had pleaded guilty or faced charges. The fallout forced longtime FIFA president Sepp Blatter to resign amid mounting evidence of systemic bribery and vote rigging. Obama drama. In the Halloween cold open of Treehouse of Horror 19, Homer arrives at a polling station, feeds his ballot into an electronic voting machine, and watches in horror as it immediately flashes error. A mechanical arm snatches his vote and spits him out into the street. This airborne gag about unreliable electronics aired just 2 days before Barack Obama's historic victory, and some have since read it as a sly nod to the partisan battles and birther claims that would surface during his presidency. In truth, the sequence was conceived purely as broad Halloween satire. There's no mention of Obama by name, no allusion to racial politics or legal controversies, and no setup beyond the classic fear that your vote might literally disappear into a broken machine. The uncanny timing is purely coincidental, not a prescient forecast of any Obama drama. Ocean Gate Incident. The 2006 episode Homer's Paternity Coot finds Homer and his newly discovered father, Mason Fairbanks, piloting individual mini-submarines deep beneath the ocean to recover the fabled emeralds of Piso Mojado. After becoming separated from Mason, Homer pursues a glowing fish into a coral crevice, only to have his vessel become wedged and his oxygen supply begin to run out. He loses consciousness, drifts into a coma, and wakes up 3 days later in a hospital bed, mirroring the very real dangers of undersea exploration. 17 years later, in June 2023, Ocean Gate's Titan submersible, carrying 5 tourists bound for the wreck of the Titanic, lost contact early in its descent and ultimately imploded under immense pressure, killing everyone on board. The craft suffered communications failures and rapidly depleted oxygen reserves before the tragedy unfolded. Fans and commentators were struck by the eerie parallel. Both stories hinge on private submersibles in peril, life support systems failing, and explorers facing the abyss in near-complete silence. Disney buying 20th Century Fox. In the Season 10 episode, When You Dish Upon a Star, which originally aired on November 8, 1998, Homer lands a job as personal assistant to Alec Baldwin and Kim Basinger, spending much of the story on the 20th Century Fox backlot. In one blink and you miss it gag, the entrance sign reads, 20th Century Fox, a division of Walt Disney Company. That throwaway visual joke played on the two studios' rivalry at the time, but nearly 20 years later, it rang eerily true. Fast forward to December 14, 2017, when Disney announced its intent to acquire most of 21st Century Fox for $71.3 billion. And by March 20, 2019, the deal was complete, officially bringing Fox's storied studio operations under Disney's umbrella. That one-frame gag now stands as one of The Simpsons' most memorable forecasts of a landmark entertainment industry shakeup. Legalizing marijuana. In Midnight RX, Springfield's prescription drug plan is abruptly canceled, sending Homer, Grandpa, Ned, and Apu on a late-night smuggling run to Canada. While navigating Winnipeg's back roads, Ned meets his polite Canadian doppelganger, who, to Ned's shock, offers him a puff on a reeferino and deadpans, It's legal here. The line is tossed off as a bit about Canada's looser drug laws, not a bold forecast. Fast forward 13 years. On October 17, 2018, Canada's Cannabis Act came into force, making recreational marijuana legal nationwide. Adults could henceforth possess up to 30 grams in public, grow up to 4 plants at home, and purchase from regulated retailers, just as that Canadian Flanders bragged back in 2005.